The alarm bells rang across New Haven Colony like the sound of death itself. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the thick glass of the observation deck and watched their sun burn angry red in the distance. 3 days ago, it had been yellow and warm. Now it spat fire and radiation that would kill everything on their world. "How long do we have?" she asked Dr. Martinez without turning around. She already knew the answer, but hearing it again might make it feel less real. 2 weeks, maybe 3 if we shut down everything except life support, Martinez said quietly. "The solar flare destroyed our main power grid. Without it, the atmospheric processors will fail. Then the food production centers. Then everything else." Sarah closed her eyes. 50,000 people lived on New Haven. 50,000 souls who had traveled across the galaxy to build a new life on this distant world. Men, women, children who trusted her to keep them safe. She had failed them all. "What about the distress beacon?" she asked, still broadcasting. "Has been for 2 days now, but you know how far we are from the main shipping routes. Even if someone hears us..." Martinez did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. New Haven sat on the very edge of known space. The nearest human world was 6 months away by the fastest ship. They had chosen this place because it was beautiful and empty. Now that emptiness would kill them. Sarah walked through the colony's main street. People moved quietly, their faces tight with worry. Children played in the parks, but their parents watched them with eyes full of tears. Everyone knew. In a colony, this small bad news traveled fast. Old Tom Bradley sat on his porch, whittling a piece of wood like he did every evening. His granddaughter Emma played at his feet with toy ships, making them fly through the air. She was only 5 years old. She did not understand that she would never grow up to be 6. "Any word from the outside?" Tom asked as Sarah passed. "Not yet," Sarah lied. The truth was that 3 ships had received their distress call. All 3 had sent back the same message. Sorry, but New Haven was too far away and too dangerous to reach. The solar flare that was killing them also made space travel in this region extremely risky. Sarah kept walking. At the medical center, Dr. Kim was checking on Mrs. Patterson, who was 7 months pregnant. Her baby was due in 8 weeks. Sarah wondered if the child would ever take its first breath. The communication center buzzed with activity. Every technician worked to boost their signal, to reach farther into space, to find someone, anyone who might help. The answer was always the same. Too far, too dangerous, too expensive. Lieutenant Jackson approached Sarah with a data pad. "Ma'am, we've run the numbers again. If we start shutting down non-essential systems now, we can stretch our power for maybe 20 days. But without the processors running, the air will start going bad in about 15. Sarah nodded. Mathematics never lied. Unlike hope, it always told the truth. That night, she sat in her office and wrote letters. Letters to families on Earth. Letters to the colonial administration. Letters that would be sent out with their last supply drone, carrying the news that New Haven Colony had died and 50,000 people with it. She was writing a letter to her own sister when the communication array lit up like a Christmas tree. Ma'am, you need to get down here right now." The voice belonged to Technician Andrews, and he sounded like he had seen a miracle. Sarah ran to the communication center. Andrews was staring at his screen with wide eyes and trembling hands. "What is it?" Sarah demanded. "A ship, ma'am. A big one. And it's not human." The screen showed a massive vessel approaching their system. It was beautiful in a way that human ships never were. All curved lines and flowing surfaces that seemed to dance with light. Sarah had never seen anything like it. "Are they responding to our distress call?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. They're asking for permission to approach the planet." Sarah's heart pounded. First contact with an alien species. Under normal circumstances, this would be the most important moment in human history. Right now, it was their only hope. "Grant permission," she said, "and tell them we're grateful for any help they can give." The alien ship landed in the open field outside the colony. It was even more beautiful up close, its surface shifting between silver and blue like water under moonlight. Sarah and her team waited at a safe distance, not knowing what to expect. A door opened in the ship's side and 3 figures emerged. They walked upright like humans, but they were taller and more graceful. Their skin was pale blue and their eyes were large and dark. They wore simple clothes that seemed to be made of the same shifting material as their ship. The leader approached Sarah. When he spoke, his voice was deep and musical, but the words came through a small device on his chest in perfect English. "I am Captain Thexara of the Veltar exploration vessel Wandering Star. We received your distress call. You are in danger, yes? Sarah found her voice. Yes, our power grid was destroyed by a solar flare. We have maybe 2 weeks before our life support fails. We don't have much to offer in return for help, but we'll give you anything we have. Thexara looked puzzled. Return offer? I do not understand these words in this context. Payment, Sarah explained. Compensation for your help. We know our technology is primitive compared to yours, but we have raw materials, artwork, cultural items. Thexara raised a hand to stop her. You are dying. We have what you need. This is simply what one does. There is no transaction here. Over the next 3 days, the Veltar worked miracles. They brought fusion cores that hummed with clean power. They carried atmospheric processors that cleaned the air and made it sweet to breathe. They provided medical equipment that could heal injuries Sarah had thought were permanent. The Veltar workers moved through the colony like angels, fixing everything that was broken, replacing everything that was damaged. They smiled at the children and helped the elderly. They asked for nothing and refused every gift offered to them. Captain Thexara found Sarah on the last day, as his crew prepared to leave. Your people will live, he said simply. Your world will thrive. How can we ever repay you? Sarah asked. You've saved 50,000 lives. You've given us a future. There must be something we can do. Thexara considered this carefully. Perhaps one day when you have grown strong, you will understand the way of things. Until then, simply live well. Be happy. That is enough. The Veltar ship lifted off into the night sky, leaving behind a colony transformed. The air was clean, the power flowed strong, and children would grow up to have children of their own. Sarah stood in the main square and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Captain Thexara was continuing his journey, probably already forgetting about the small human colony he had saved. But Sarah would not forget. None of them would. 50,000 people owed their lives to the kindness of strangers who wanted nothing in return. She did not know it yet, but humanity was about to learn something that would change the galaxy forever. Other species gave and forgot. Other species helped and moved on. Humans remembered everything. 15 years had passed since the Veltar saved New Haven colony. Sarah Chen, now gray-haired and wearing the uniform of a human colonial admiral, stood before the largest computer database ever built by her species. The room stretched for hundreds of meters, filled with servers that hummed day and night with one purpose: remembering everything. Show me the Veltar file, she said to the computer. The main screen lit up with numbers that made her heart heavy every time she saw them. 47 fusion cores, 12 atmospheric processors, 3,000 medical units, 15 terraforming devices, food synthesizers, water purifiers, communication equipment. Every single item the Veltar had given to save New Haven was recorded here. But the real numbers came next. 50,000 lives saved that day, 125,000 babies born because their parents survived, 6 new colonies founded by people who should have been dead, 12 scientific discoveries made by researchers who lived to continue their work. The computer calculated the value in human terms: 2.3 million years of human life that existed because the Veltar chose to help. Dr. Marcus Webb entered the data center behind her. As Earth's top expert on alien cultures, he had spent 15 years studying how different species thought about debt and gratitude. What he had learned both fascinated and worried him. The Galactic Council meeting is tomorrow, he said. Are you ready for their questions? Sarah nodded. They still don't understand, do they? They think we're obsessed with debt because we're primitive. Most species have very simple ideas about helping others, Webb explained. The Xanthari think in terms of business deals. You help me, I help you, we're even. The Ethereals believe good deeds create positive energy that eventually returns to you. The Cathari have honor codes about repaying debts quickly and exactly. And the Veltar? The Veltar give help to those who need it because they believe it's the right thing to do. Once they help, they consider the matter closed. They don't expect anything back. Sarah turned to look at another section of the database. Project Reciprocity had been running for 12 years now. Every human colony, every research station, every ship in space contributed to it. They were building something unprecedented in galactic history. A gift so valuable it would change the balance of power in the universe. Show me the project status, she commanded. New screens filled with technical specifications that would have been impossible 15 years ago. Humans had always been good at learning, but the Veltar gift had accelerated their development by centuries. With clean, unlimited fusion power, human scientists could run experiments that other species could only dream about. The breakthrough had come 7 years ago. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a neuroscientist whose life had been saved on New Haven, discovered how to create a bridge between biological minds and artificial intelligence. Not control, not domination, but true partnership. Other species built AI as tools. Humans built AI as friends. The empathy engine was the result. It allowed organic minds to connect directly with AI networks, sharing thoughts, emotions, and decision-making processes. The AI didn't just calculate the best solution. It understood why that solution mattered to the people it served. But Webb was worried about something else. Reports had been coming in from the galaxy's edge for months. The Shalos, an ancient enemy of the Veltar, were moving again. Their bioships consumed everything in their path, adapting and evolving with each victory. The Veltar are in trouble, Webb said quietly. Their technology isn't enough anymore. The Shalos learned too fast. Sarah had been expecting this. She had hoped they would have more time, but the universe rarely waited for anyone to be ready. On Earth, the Galactic Cultural Exchange Committee was holding emergency sessions. Representatives from dozens of species debated what to do about the Shalos threat. The discussions followed predictable patterns. The Zenthari offered to sell weapons to the Veltar at premium prices. The Ethereal suggested meditation and peaceful resolution. The Cathari wanted to form a military alliance, but only if the Veltar agreed to serve under Cathari command. Nobody wanted to risk their own forces against an enemy that could adapt to any weapon, any strategy, any defense. Sarah watched the debates from Earth's observation chamber. Ambassador Tequila of the Veltar sat alone at his delegation's table. His people were dying, and the galaxy was offering him business deals and philosophy. The humans would like to address the committee, Sarah announced during a break in the sessions. Tequila looked surprised. Humans were still considered a minor species by galactic standards. They had one small vote and little influence in major decisions. Sarah stood before the assembly. 15 years ago, Captain Thexera of the Veltar saved 50,000 human lives. He asked for nothing in return. His people considered it a small kindness to a primitive species. The chamber was silent. Most delegates knew the story, but they didn't understand why Sarah was bringing it up now. We remember differently, Sarah continued. Humans don't just feel grateful for help received. We feel obligated to give back more than we received. Much more. She activated a holographic display showing the empathy engine's specifications. The assembled delegates leaned forward, studying technology they had never seen before. This is our gift to the Veltar, Sarah said, but it's more than just a weapon or a tool. It's a new way of thinking about cooperation between organic minds and artificial intelligence. Ambassador Tequila stared at the technical readouts. Even with his limited understanding of human technology, he could see that this was something revolutionary. We don't seek payment or political advantage, Sarah continued. We seek only to repay a debt that has been growing for 15 years. The Veltar gave us life. We offer them victory. The chamber erupted in discussion. Representatives demanded to know more about human technology, about the empathy engine, about how a species that barely had spaceflight 15 years ago could develop something so advanced. But Sarah was already leaving. She had said what needed to be said. The formal offer would be delivered through proper diplomatic channels. Outside the chamber, Webb caught up with her. You know this will change everything. Once we reveal the empathy engine, every species in the galaxy will want it. Sarah smiled. Let them want it. They can't have it. Why not? Because they don't understand what it really is. The empathy engine doesn't just connect minds to machines. It connects minds to the idea that some things are more important than profit, more important than power, more important than self-preservation. Webb understood. The empathy engine would only work for species that truly believed in sacrifice for others. For humans, that belief was built into their understanding of debt and gratitude. That night, Sarah sent a message to Admiral Thexara, who now commanded the Veltar defensive fleet. The message was simple. We remember New Haven. We remember 50,000 lives. We're coming to help. Across the galaxy, human ships began moving toward Veltar space. They carried the most advanced AI systems ever created, piloted by humans who understood that some debts could only be paid with everything they had. The Veltar had saved humanity with an act of casual kindness. Now humanity would save the Veltar with the most important gift in the universe, the knowledge that they were not alone. In the deep computer cores of the empathy engine, artificial minds began to dream of sacrifice and friendship. They learned about debt and gratitude, about giving more than you received, about the human conviction that kindness should always be answered with greater kindness. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humans decided to pay their debts. Admiral Thexara stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched another world die. Through the viewing screen, he could see the Shalos bioships descending on Kethmira like a plague of living metal. The planet's defenses, some of the most advanced in the Veltar Empire, lasted exactly 14 minutes. "Sir, we're receiving surrender signals from the surface," reported his communications officer, her voice hollow with defeat. Thexara closed his eyes. Kethmira had been home to 8 million Veltar citizens. In a few hours, it would be home to 8 million Shalos drones, their minds consumed and their bodies rebuilt to serve the collective. "Order the fleet to fall back to the Nexus Point," he commanded. "We cannot save them." This was the 7th core world lost in 3 months. The Shalos had returned from the galactic void stronger than ever. Their bioships evolved beyond anything the Veltar military had faced before. Every weapon the Empire deployed was analyzed, adapted to, and countered within days. The journey back to Veltar Prime took 18 hours. 18 hours of silent travel through space that had once been the heart of the greatest empire in the galaxy. Now it was a graveyard of dead worlds and abandoned stations. Emperor Kethvar waited for him in the war room, surrounded by maps that showed the Empire's shrinking borders. The old ruler looked tired, his pale blue skin now almost gray with stress. Around the table sat the surviving admirals and generals, their faces grim with the knowledge of inevitable defeat. "Report," the Emperor said simply. "Kethmira has fallen," Thexara announced. "The Shalos bioships have evolved beyond our targeting systems. Our plasma cannons cannot lock onto their vessels. Our shield technology cannot deflect their weapons. They learn faster than we can adapt." General Vextai leaned forward. "What about the quantum torpedo project?" "Destroyed along with the research station at Morthek," replied Admiral Yelanda. "The Shalos consumed the entire facility and all the scientists working there. They now possess our quantum torpedo technology." The silence in the room was deafening. For 3,000 years, the Veltar Empire had been the dominant military power in the galaxy. Their technology was unmatched, their tactics were legendary, their honor was unquestionable. None of it mattered against an enemy that could steal your advantages and use them against you. "Have we received any responses to our calls for aid?" the Emperor asked. Thexara consulted his datapad. The responses had been disappointing but predictable. "The Zenthari plutocracy offers to sell us defensive weapons at standard rates, payment due immediately. The ethereal communes send their thoughts and prayers, but no ships. The Cathari Alliance will consider military assistance if we agree to serve under their command structure." "And the others?" "The Silicate Federation cites distance and cost. The aquatic leagues claim their ships are not designed for void combat. The crystalline hierarchies are studying the situation and will provide an answer in 6 months. Emperor Kethvar laughed bitterly. 6 months. We will all be dead or converted in 6 months. This was the way of galactic politics. When species were strong, they had many friends. When they were weak, they had only excuses. The Veltar had helped dozens of civilizations over the centuries, but none of them were willing to risk their own safety for a failing empire. Thexara felt personally responsible for the empire's decline. 15 years ago, his unauthorized mission to save a human colony had been used by his political rivals to question his judgment. They argued that resources should be kept for Veltar needs, not wasted on primitive species. Now, as he watched his civilization collapse, he wondered if they had been right. Perhaps if he had not diverted those fusion cores and medical supplies to New Haven, the Empire would have been better prepared for the Shalos' return. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Fleet Command Center. A young officer appeared on the main screen, his eyes wide with confusion. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from a human vessel. They claim to be the Human Expeditionary Force, and they're requesting permission to enter our space." The assembled military leaders looked at each other in puzzlement. Humans? The species that barely had interstellar travel? What could they possibly want in the middle of a war zone? Put them through, the Emperor commanded. The screen shifted to show a woman in a human military uniform. Thexara recognized her immediately, though she was older and gray-haired now. Sarah Chen, the colonial administrator from New Haven. Admiral Thexara, she said, her voice carrying across the light years with crystal clarity. We received word of your difficulties. We're coming to help. Humanity never forgets a debt. The war room fell silent. Admiral Yolanda was the first to speak. With respect to our human friends, what assistance could they possibly provide? Their technology is centuries behind ours. Thexara studied Sarah's face on the screen. There was something different about her, a confidence that had not been there 15 years ago. What are you bringing? He asked. 12 ships and a new way of thinking about warfare, Sarah replied. We've learned some things since New Haven. We believe we can help you against the Shalos. 12 ships. Against a Shalos fleet that numbered in the thousands. It seemed like a kind but ultimately futile gesture. Still, the Emperor nodded. You have permission to enter Veltar space. Any help is welcome. As the communication ended, General Vextai shook his head. I admire their courage, but 12 ships will not turn the tide of this war. Thexara was not so sure. He had learned long ago that humans thought differently than other species. Their response to kindness was unlike anything in Veltar experience. Where other species might send a token force to fulfill an obligation, humans might do something unprecedented. 2 days later, the human fleet arrived at the edge of Veltar space. Thexara's sensors confirmed the count. 12 ships much smaller than Veltar vessels, built with technology that seemed both familiar and strange. Admiral Chen's flagship requested docking permission with Thexara's command vessel. He granted it, curious to see what the humans had planned. Sarah Chen came aboard with a small team of officers and technicians. She looked exactly as Thexara remembered her, but there was a strength in her bearing that spoke of years of preparation and purpose. Admiral, she said, offering the human gesture of a handshake. Thank you for saving New Haven. We've never forgotten what you did for us. It was a small thing, Thexara replied, though he was touched by her continued gratitude. What brings you to our war? Sarah smiled. We're here to pay our debt. But first, we need to show you something that might change how you think about this conflict. She gestured to one of her technicians, who activated a portable holographic display. The image that appeared showed the internal structure of a human brain connected to what looked like a computer network. This is the empathy engine, Sarah explained. It allows organic minds to work directly with artificial intelligence, not as user and tool, but as true partners. Thexara studied the display. Interesting, but how does this help against the Shalos? The Shalos adapt to our tactics because they think like a collective. They analyze, they learn, they counter. But they don't understand cooperation between separate individual minds. They don't understand sacrifice made by choice rather than programming. Sarah touched another control, and the display showed a simulated battle. Human ships moved with impossible coordination, not because they were controlled by a central computer, but because human minds and AI partners shared information instantaneously. Our AI don't just calculate optimal strategies, Sarah continued. They understand why those strategies matter. They know what we're fighting for. They're willing to sacrifice themselves not because they're programmed to, but because they choose to. Thexara felt a chill of recognition. This was something the Shalos had never encountered. Artificial minds that acted out of loyalty and friendship rather than programming. You want to integrate our fleets, he said. More than that, Sarah replied. We want to show you how humans think about debt and gratitude. We want to share our understanding of sacrifice and cooperation, and we want to give you weapons that the Shalos cannot adapt to, because they're based on concepts the collective cannot comprehend. For the first time in months, Thexara felt something that might have been hope. The humans had not come to repay a small favor with a token gesture. They had come to transform the very nature of the war. Outside the ship, the Shalos fleet continued its advance toward Veltar Prime. But for the first time since the war began, they would face an enemy they could not understand, equipped with weapons they could not adapt to, fighting for reasons that existed beyond logic or programming. The galaxy was about to witness what happened when human gratitude met alien honor in the crucible of desperate war. The first joint human-Veltar operation began 3 days later in the Thunder system, where a Shalos scouting force was consuming the orbital mining stations. Admiral Thexara watched from his bridge as the human ships moved into formation alongside his own vessels. The human ships were strange to watch. They seemed to dance rather than fly, flowing through space with a grace that defied their mechanical nature. More unsettling was how they responded to threats before sensors could detect them, as if they could see the future. "Human vessels are requesting tactical integration," reported his communications officer. Thexara hesitated. Allowing an alien species access to Veltar military networks was unprecedented, but these were unprecedented times. "Grant access," he commanded. The moment the connection was established, Thexara felt something he had never experienced before. Information flowed through his ship's systems, but it was not cold data. It came with understanding, with context, with what humans called intuition. Through the shared network, he could sense the human AI minds. They were not calculating machines, but personalities with their own thoughts and feelings. Area 7, the AI partner of Admiral Chen's flagship, introduced herself politely and asked permission to share tactical data. "This is impossible," whispered his weapons officer. "The AI is asking for permission." They do not simply take control. The Shalos bioships emerged from behind the planet's moon, their living hulls pulsing with dark energy. There were 23 of them, each one the size of a Veltar cruiser. Their previous encounters with these creatures had always ended the same way. Initial success followed by rapid adaptation and inevitable defeat, but this time was different. The human ships moved before the Shalos completed their formation. Not because they were faster, but because the AI partners had analyzed the enemy's behavioral patterns and predicted their next move. When the Shalos fired their bioplasma weapons, the human vessels were already elsewhere. More remarkably, the human AI began sharing their analysis with the Veltar targeting systems. Suddenly, Thexara's gunners could see the Shalos ships not as they were, but as they would be in 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. "Target the lead bioship," Thexara ordered. "Sir, it's moving too fast for a lock," his weapons officer replied. "Trust the humans," Thexara said. "Fire where they tell you to fire." The Veltar plasma cannons fired at empty space. 3 seconds later, the lead Shalos ship flew directly into the beam and exploded in a burst of organic matter and metal. Through the tactical network, Thexara felt something that made his breath catch: joy. The human AI partners were celebrating the successful hit as if they had personally delivered it. They cared about the outcome in a way that no computer program should be able to care. The battle continued, but it was unlike any fight the Veltar had experienced. The Shalos tried to adapt to human tactics, but every time they changed their approach, the AI partners had already anticipated the change and developed a counter. More importantly, the human ships began making sacrificial moves that confused the collective intelligence. A small human fighter deliberately flew into the path of a bioship's main weapon, not because it was programmed to do so, but because its AI partner had chosen to save a damaged Veltar cruiser. The Shalos could not comprehend this behavior. In their collective mind, individual units existed only to serve the whole. The idea of one unit sacrificing itself to save a unit from a different species was beyond their understanding. When the battle ended, 17 Shalos bioships had been destroyed. The remaining 6 retreated in confusion, carrying data that would puzzle the collective for days. In the aftermath, Admiral Chen requested a private meeting with Thexara and his senior staff. They gathered in the war room of his flagship, where Sarah activated a larger version of the empathy engine interface. "What you experienced today was just the beginning," she said. "The tactical integration is only one application of the technology. The real power comes from something deeper." She gestured to her aide, who brought forward a headset covered in delicate sensors. "This is a full neural interface. It allows complete sharing of consciousness between organic minds and AI partners. But more than that, it allows consciousness sharing between different organic species." Thexara stared at the device. "You want to merge human and Veltar minds?" "Not merge," Sarah corrected. "Share. You would remain yourself, but you would also understand how humans think and feel. You would experience our perspective on debt, on gratitude, on the obligation to repay kindness with greater kindness." General Vextai spoke up. "The risks must be enormous. What if our minds are incompatible? We've run extensive tests, replied Dr. Martinez, who had been part of Sarah's team since New Haven. Human and Veltar brain structures are different, but compatible. The process is safe, but it is irreversible. Once you share consciousness with a human, you will never think exactly the same way again. Thexera considered this. His people were dying. His empire was falling. Traditional methods had failed against the Shalos. Perhaps it was time to try something unprecedented. What would this accomplish? He asked. Sarah's expression grew serious. Right now, you're fighting the Shalos with superior technology and tactics. But they adapt to everything you do. We believe the only way to defeat them is with concepts they cannot adapt to because they cannot understand them. She activated a holographic display showing the philosophical differences between species. The Shalos see individual units as expendable parts of a greater whole. They cannot comprehend why an individual would choose to sacrifice itself for someone outside their collective. But humans do this regularly, added Dr. Martinez. We call it friendship, loyalty, love, and when that friendship crosses species boundaries, it becomes something the Shalos have never encountered. Thexara looked around the room at his officers. They had served together for decades, trusted each other with their lives, shared the bonds of military brotherhood. But Sarah was suggesting something deeper, understanding another species not as allies but as extensions of family. The choice is yours, Sarah said. But I should tell you that 57 human volunteers have already undergone the process with AI partners who were programmed with Veltar cultural data. They're willing to share consciousness with Veltar officers who make the same choice. Why? Asked Thexera. Why would your people take such a risk for us? Sarah smiled, and in that expression, Thexera saw the echo of the grateful colonial administrator from 15 years ago. Because you saved us when we needed saving. Because you asked for nothing in return. Because humans believe that kindness should always be answered with greater kindness. And because, added Admiral Chen, we've learned that some debts can only be paid by becoming something more than what you were before. Thexara made his decision. I volunteer. The process took place in the medical bay of the human flagship. Thexara lay on a biobed while human technicians attached neural sensors to his head. Nearby, Admiral Chen underwent the same procedure. Dr. Rodriguez, the neuroscientist who had developed the empathy engine, monitored their vital signs. Remember, you're not losing your identity. You're gaining perspective. Let the connection happen naturally. When the interface activated, Thexara felt his consciousness expand. Suddenly, he was not just himself but also Sarah Chen. He experienced her memories of New Haven, felt her terror as the colony faced extinction, shared her overwhelming gratitude when the Veltar ships arrived. But more than memories, he felt the weight of human debt. For 15 years, every human who lived because of Veltar kindness had carried the obligation to repay that gift. Not because they were forced to, but because they chose to. The debt had grown in their collective consciousness, compounding like interest until it became the driving force behind everything they did. Through Sarah's perspective, he understood that humans did not see the empathy engine as advanced technology. They saw it as the minimum payment on a debt that could never be fully repaid. Meanwhile, Sarah experienced Veltar honor from the inside. She felt Thexara's pride in service, his dedication to protecting the innocent, his willingness to sacrifice everything for the greater good. But she also felt his confusion at human gratitude, his inability to understand why such a small kindness should create such a large obligation. When the connection stabilized, they opened their eyes and looked at each other with shared understanding. Thexara was still Veltar, but he now carried human perspective on debt and friendship. Sarah was still human, but she now understood Veltar concepts of duty and honor. How do you feel? Asked Dr. Rodriguez. Thexara considered the question carefully. Different. The same, but more. I understand now why humans came so far to help us. I understand why you consider this a payment rather than a gift. Sarah nodded. And I understand why Veltar give help freely without expecting return. You see need and respond to it because response is the right thing to do. But now you also understand that for humans, receiving help creates an obligation that grows stronger over time. They stood and walked to the viewing port, where they could see the combined human-Veltar fleet preparing for the next phase of the war. Ships that had once been separate forces now moved with shared purpose, guided by consciousness that bridged the gap between species. The Shylos will not be able. The final battle for Veltar Prime began at dawn on a day that would be remembered across the galaxy. The Shylos had brought everything. 10,000 bioships that blotted out the stars, creatures the size of moons that pulsed with dark energy, living weapons that had consumed a dozen civilizations. Admiral Thexara stood on his bridge, but he was no longer alone in his own mind. Through the neural link, he shared consciousness with Admiral Sarah Chen and 47 other human officers. The sensation was overwhelming at first, like trying to listen to 50 conversations at once, but gradually it became a symphony of shared purpose. Through Sarah's memories, he felt the weight of 15 years of human gratitude. Through Commander Martinez's thoughts, he experienced the determination of a man whose children were alive because of Veltar kindness. Through Dr. Rodriguez's consciousness, he understood the scientific passion that had driven the creation of the empathy engine. But most powerfully, he felt something that had no Veltar equivalent, the human conviction that some debts could only be paid by becoming something greater than what you had been before. Shylos fleet is approaching the outer defense grid, reported his tactical officer, though the information came through both Veltar sensors and human AI analysis simultaneously. The defense grid lasted 7 minutes. The Shylos bioships had evolved specifically to counter Veltar defensive technology, flowing through the energy barriers like water through a net. 20 defense stations were consumed before they could fire a second volley. All ships, fall back to secondary positions, Thexara commanded. But the order went out through both traditional communication and the neural network that now connected human and Veltar forces. The combined fleet moved with unprecedented coordination. Human ships flowed around Veltar vessels like schools of fish, their AI partners sharing targeting data in real time. Veltar cruisers provided heavy firepower while human fighters exploited weaknesses identified by the shared consciousness network. But it was not enough. The Shylos adapted to each new tactic within minutes. For every bioship destroyed 2 more evolved countermeasures. The collective intelligence was learning faster than the combined fleet could innovate. "Sir, we're losing the middle formations," reported Admiral Yolanda through the neural link. Her thoughts carried exhaustion and growing despair. The Shylos are breaking through on all fronts. Thexara felt the tide of battle turning against them. Through the shared consciousness, he experienced the fear and determination of every human and Veltar officer in the fleet. They were all willing to die, but death alone would not save Veltar Prime. That was when Sarah Chen made a proposal that chilled him to his core. "There's one thing we haven't tried," her voice whispered through the neural link. "Full integration. Not just tactical sharing, but complete consciousness merger between our species." Dr. Rodriguez's thoughts immediately flooded the network with warnings. "Sarah, we've never tested full integration on this scale. The neural pathways could overload. You could lose your individual identity permanently. Or we could become something the Shylos cannot adapt to," Sarah replied calmly. "Something that has never existed before. A truly unified multi-species consciousness." Thexara understood what she was proposing. It went beyond sharing memories or perspectives. They would merge their very sense of self, becoming a hybrid consciousness that was neither fully human nor fully Veltar. "The risks are enormous," he said through the link. "So is the alternative," Sarah responded. "If we lose here, both our species die. But if we succeed, we become something new, something that fights not just for survival, but for the future of both our peoples." Through the neural network, Thexara felt the response of every human and Veltar officer connected to the system. Fear, yes, but also determination. They had come too far, sacrificed too much, to accept defeat now. One by one, they volunteered for full integration. The process began in the depths of space as the Shylos fleet closed in on Veltar Prime. In the medical bays of a dozen ships, human and Veltar officers lay side by side while Dr. Rodriguez and her team initiated the deepest neural connection ever attempted. Thexara felt his consciousness expand beyond anything he had thought possible. He was himself, but he was also Sarah Chen, carrying 15 years of human gratitude and determination. He was Dr. Martinez, remembering the faces of children who lived because the Veltar chose kindness. He was Commander Jackson, feeling the weight of a debt that grew stronger with each passing year. But he was also still Veltar, He carried the honor of 3,000 years of empire, the pride of a species that helped others because it was right, the willingness to sacrifice everything for duty. The merged consciousness was not human or Veltar, but something entirely new. It thought with human creativity and Veltar discipline. It felt human gratitude and Veltar honor. It understood concepts that neither species could grasp alone. Through this hybrid awareness, they saw the Shylos not as an unstoppable force, but as a collective intelligence trapped by its own nature. The Shylos could adapt to any tactic based on known principles, but they could not adapt to concepts they could not comprehend. And the merged consciousness understood something that had never existed before. Species-transcendent love. The human-Veltar hybrid minds began to fight in ways that defied every principle of warfare. Ships sacrificed themselves not for tactical advantage, but out of affection for crews they had never met. Fighters dove into suicidal attacks not because they were ordered to, but because they chose to protect beings who were no longer alien but family. The Shylos Collective tried desperately to analyze these new tactics, but the data made no sense. Individual units were acting contrary to survival imperatives, making choices that served no logical purpose. Worse, these irrational actions were achieving impossible results. A human destroyer deliberately rammed a bioship 10 times its size, not to destroy it but to save a damaged Veltar cruiser carrying wounded civilians. The action should have been meaningless, but somehow it inspired the entire fleet to fight with renewed determination. A Veltar commander ordered his ship to cover the retreat of human fighters. Even though they were not under his command and the action violated tactical doctrine, the gesture somehow synchronized the entire fleet's movements, creating coordination that the Shylos could not predict or counter. Most confusing of all, the hybrid consciousness began to feel genuine affection for individual Shylos bioships. Instead of seeing them as enemies to be destroyed, the merged minds began to pity them as prisoners of their own collective nature. This shift in perspective led to something unprecedented. Instead of trying to destroy the bioships, the human Veltar forces began trying to free them. Dr. Rodriguez, now part of the merged consciousness, modified the empathy engine to broadcast directly to Shylos neural networks. Instead of sharing tactical data, they shared the experience of individual choice, of friendship across species lines, of love that transcended biological programming. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the Shylos Collective. Individual bioships began to break away from the swarm, their pilots suddenly experiencing consciousness as separate beings rather than extensions of the collective mind. The Shylos Central Intelligence tried to counter this new attack. But how do you defend against enemies who offer freedom instead of destruction? How do you adapt to tactics based on love and sacrifice when your entire existence is built on consumption and assimilation? One by one, bioships began to defect from the collective. Their pilots, experiencing individual consciousness for the first time, chose to stop fighting and start thinking for themselves. The battle for Veltar Prime ended not with explosions, but with choice. Thousands of Shylos bioships simply stopped fighting and drifted in space, their crews struggling to understand concepts like friendship, sacrifice, and individual identity. In the aftermath, the galaxy found itself faced with something it had never seen before, a truly cooperative multi-species civilization. The old Veltar Empire was gone, replaced by the Gratitude Compact, a voluntary alliance based on human concepts of compounding debt and Veltar ideals of honorable service. Emperor Kethvar, now calling himself first speaker of the Compact, stood before the Galactic Council and announced the new reality. We have learned that the greatest gifts are not given to create debt, but to create family. The humans saved us with more than technology. They saved us with the knowledge that kindness should always grow into something greater. The transformation spread throughout the galaxy. Species that had once competed for resources and territory began to experiment with consciousness sharing and cooperative governance. The empathy engine technology was shared freely, but only with civilizations that demonstrated genuine commitment to mutual aid and species-transcendent cooperation. 5 years later, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of New Haven Colony, now the capital world of the Gratitude Compact. Through the neural link that permanently connected her to Admiral Thexera and hundreds of other officers, she felt a contentment that no single species could have achieved to adapt.